Hi class, welcome to our multiplying and dividing fractions notes. To start off, let's look at the first problem. Ms. Fersner is making a batch of cookies using a recipe that requires 3/4 cup of flour. She needs to triple this recipe so that she can make enough cookies for all of her students. Now, how much flour will she need? Okay, this is a question to think about. We're going to come back to this. Our second question that we're going to look at is, Steph Curry's 4 sisters inherit 12.5 acres of land. And for those who don't know what an acre is, it's basically a way that we measure how much land there is. Okay, so they have 12.5 acres of land. They decided to split it equally. How much land does each sister get? Solve with a drawing. Before we answer these two questions, I'm going to take you through the steps for how to multiply and divide fractions. So let's jump into it now. So the first thing you're going to do is write steps for multiplying fractions, and we'll jump into our first step. Step number 1, we are going to change any mixed numbers to improper fractions. And this is an example. A mixed number is where you have the large number and then you have a fraction right beside it. We're going to change that to an improper fraction. Remember, in order to do that, we'll use the method multiply, add, keep. And then any whole numbers, we'll change those to fraction form. For those who didn't know, the whole number 3 is the same thing as 3/1. And the whole number 5 is the same thing as 5/1. The whole number 100 is the same thing as 100/1. So any whole number we can change into a fraction form by putting it over 1. The next step, after we've converted our mixed numbers to improper fractions and our whole numbers to fraction form, we are now going to multiply the numerators and the denominators straight across. And finally, we're going to simplify. So now, let's use these steps and apply them in solving our first problem. Read the problem over again so we can make sure we understand. Ms. Fersner is making a batch of cookies using a recipe that requires 3/4 cup of flour. So I know that this is going to be important, so I'm going to underline it. You should too. She needs to triple, that's important, this recipe so she can have enough cookies for all of her students. How much flour will she need? Well, we're going to start off with the fact that for the recipe, the first recipe is going to require 3/4 cup of flour. Okay, this is just the original. This is the original recipe. But I need to triple this recipe. The word triple is another word for 3 times. So, triple 3 times. Okay? So pretty much I'm going to multiply 3/4 times 3. So now I'm going to take this over here and set my problem up the right way, using my steps. So the first thing I'm going to do is rewrite my problem. 3/4 times 3. Okay? The first thing I'm going to do is change any mixed numbers to improper fractions or any whole numbers to fraction form. Well, I don't have any mixed numbers here, but I do have a whole number. So I'm going to rewrite my problem. I'm going to put my equal sign and I'm going to rewrite it. 3/4 times 3/1. Next, I'm going to multiply the numerator straight across, and I'm going to multiply my denominator straight across. So, 3 times 3 is 9, and 4 times 1 is 4. But I can't leave my answer like this. I have to simplify and then convert it back to a mixed number. I can't get any simpler than 9/4, so when I change it into a mixed number, my final answer is going to be 2 1/4 cups of flour. Okay? And for those wondering how I did this, the only thing that I did was divide 9 divided by 4, and then I got this answer. Next, let's look at the steps for dividing fractions. Very similar to multiplying, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change mixed numbers to improper fractions and any whole numbers to fraction form, just like we did with multiplying fractions. But the second step is going to be a little bit different. For the second step, we're going to keep the first fraction, change the sign to multiplication, and take the reciprocal of the second fraction. And a reciprocal is basically when you switch the numerator and denominator. So, for example, A over B would now be B over A. After you do that, step 3 is going to be to multiply straight across and simplify. So now that we've understood all these words, let's put these words into action. Now let's apply the steps for dividing fractions to our next problem. Steph Curry's 4 sisters inherit 12.5 acres of land. They decide to split it equally. How much land does each sister get? Solve with a drawing. So this is a perfect thing to represent with a drawing. First of all, we know that Steph Curry has 4 sisters in this problem. And they inherit, the word inherit means get. They get 12.5 acres of land. So if I want to draw a picture, I can just draw this big old plot of 12.5 acres. Okay? But I know that it's 4 of them, and they want to split it equally. So that means we're going to have to divide it up into 4 equal parts. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, how much is each part going to be? Let's set up our problem. This problem is basically going to be 12.5 divided by 4. Okay? So I'm going to use my steps. The first thing I'm going to do is rewrite my problem over here so I have space. 12.5 divided by 4. I'm going to change any mixed numbers to improper fractions, and I'm going to change any whole numbers to fraction form. So if I use multiply, add, keep, I know that I multiply the whole number times the denominator, 24, add the numerator, 25, keep denominator. So that's going to be 25 over 2 divided by 4 over 1. Okay? Now that I have my problem set up, I am going to keep the first fraction, change the sign, take the reciprocal of the second fraction, and multiply. Okay? So here's how that's going to look. 25 over 2 times 1 over 4. Because remember, a reciprocal is just flipping the numerator and denominator. Now, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply straight across. So, 25 times 1 equals 25. 2 times 4 equals 8. And when I convert this into a mixed number, my final answer is going to be 3 1/8 acres of land. That's how many acres each sister is going to get. Now, if you didn't catch it that time, we're going to solve a few more example problems below. So, let's look at this first example. Basic multiplication. I'm going to multiply straight across since I have no mixed numbers to convert or no whole numbers to change. So 1 times 3 is 3. And 2 times 4 is 8. So my final answer is going to be 3 over 8. Let's try this one. I have 2 mixed numbers, so I have to change those into improper fractions. So this would change into 5 over 2 times 5 over 4. Once I have that set up, I'm just going to multiply straight across. That's going to give me 25 over 8. And when I change that into a mixed number, my final answer is going to be 3 1/8. Okay? Now let's look at our division problem. I'm going to see if there's any mixed numbers. No, there's not. So I'm going to keep the first fraction, change the sign to multiplication, take the reciprocal of the second fraction, and then multiply. Okay, 4 over 6. And since these two are even numbers, they can both be divided by 2. So my final answer is going to be 2/3. Let's look at this problem. Okay, we have some mixed numbers to convert. So the first thing we're going to do is convert those. We're not changing anything. We are simply converting these numbers into improper fractions. So we have 5 over 2 divided by 5 over 4. Now that I have this set up how I want it, I'm going to keep the first fraction, change the sign, take the reciprocal of the second fraction, and multiply. 5 times 4 is 20, and 2 times 5 is 10. Well, if I simplify that, that's the same thing as 2 over 1, and 2 over 1 is the same thing as the whole number 2. So 2 is going to be my final answer. Now that we have done these practice problems, if you need some extra help, please see me. But to start, I want you to flip on the back of your page. For this rest of this assignment, start by completing the top problems. Once you finish these problems, raise your hand and get them checked by me before moving on to the next set of problems, and then to the next set of problems. Happy mathing!